Dave Barnett is an energy medicine practitioner, healer, and intuitive with over 35 years experience in Colorado. He has multiple technical degrees and is truly a rocket scientist. In the early 1980s, Dave had some turning points in his life that led to a passion in discovering and developing his gifts in multiple forms of energy healing. He embarked on a path of training in many modalities and developing conceptual understanding of how the different systems work, complement each other, and support spirituality. Dave has gifts in healings, reading the Akashic records, energy and entity clearing, changing core beliefs, karma burning, and discerning spiritual gifts. Dave continually seeks out new modalities, learns and experiences them from their practitioners, and frequently highlights these on his weekly web radio show. Dave is a strong believer in health issues and having many potential causes in different energy planes. Dave works with many spiritual guides and communicates with them freely. So a lot of the people who come to my two YouTube channels, a lot of people that come to my YouTube channels are people who are in the process of the Great Awakening from an information perspective and are just now starting their spiritual awakening. And so a lot of the people who are awake and informed informationally are super religious and have no idea that they still have a spiritual awakening to go through. And then I have other people that come to my channel that are spiritually awake, but have no idea there's this whole nother level of darkness that's being brought to the surface to navigate, and how deep and how dark it is. So one of the reasons I wanted to bring you on is because you're one of those people that sees the extent of the darkness, and that's also spiritually awake.
My dad was both an engineer and an Episcopal priest, so I have that background, and I've done a lot of research in the early church, their beliefs and practices, so and how things have been distorted as they've come through the centuries and become a power structure versus a spiritual group.
Yeah, yeah. And a lot of people, I think, are going to be very, the word I'm hearing is disheartened when they realize how much their belief systems have been manipulated. Yeah. So part of my role is to help people navigate that, how to process the letting go of the fear-based beliefs that we were raised with, because God is not a God of fear. Right. So all those fear-based beliefs need to be navigated and processed and brought into a higher vibration. So yeah, one of the things I really find really fascinating about you is that you, and this is one of my things I love too, you blend science and spirituality. And so a lot of people think that they're two completely opposites. From a religion perspective, science and spirituality can't coexist. But for me, they're very closely intertwined. Almost, for me personally, science is closer to spirituality than religion is, just from my own personal experience. So it's like this triangle, and we're learning how to unify the triangle rather than seeing any of it as there are no opposing aspects. Science and religion are not at odds with each other, and spirituality and religion are not at odds with each other. They're actually all part of the same whole. So I love that you're bringing that in and showing people how they actually work together, not as enemies, if you will.
Oh, absolutely. There's a science writer named Lynn McTaggart, and she has some fascinating books, and one of the major books of hers is The Field. And she started that one where she contacted a whole bunch of physicists, quantum mechanics type people, and she started out the conversation. Well, do you believe in God? Oh, absolutely not. No way. And she said, well, do you think there's a background energy that has a consciousness to it that infuses everything and puts order in the universe? Oh, absolutely. So same thing. And they can't buy into a fairy tale image of a bearded white guy in the sky on a throne who metes out punishment, but they can certainly see that with what is going on energetically, the concepts of multiple universes, all of these things, that there's a physics that they live with, and then a metaphysics where meta means over. There's an over physics to all of this, of which as humans in our 3D world, we're only working with a subset. There's so much more to discover. One of the things that really supports this for me is the idea, this goes back to the ancient Greeks, and it still is true today. We have, well, when we look at the outside world around us, we see it through our eyes. We see it through our senses. Our eyes and our senses bring in information. It is converted in some cases to electrical signals in our nerves, other cases, chemical signals, and it goes into this big mushy thing in our head that we call the brain. And the brain has to create a construct in which we can use this data to interpret the reality around us. There's a real slippery slope there, and the Greeks confronted this, and it's still true today, that we have no independent way to validate that what you and I see out there, what we think we see out there, even what we agree is on out there, that it actually exists. We could truly be like in the movie The Matrix. We could have a probe stuck in our spinal cord, and we're all in little pods, you know, in a coma, and we think this reality is happening. And I think this is a very good jumping off point for the idea that when you meditate and you start exploring and journeying and going to different realities, they are real. This is not imagination. There's even been philosophers, one of the Japanese philosophers came out with a thing and said, last night I had a dream I was a butterfly. Or maybe I was a butterfly dreaming that I was a human. You know,
Yeah.
it's that type of thing. And I talk about parallel universes, and I've read about people having experiences in them. And a number of years ago, my wife and I had one. And in my life and my spiritual development, I've had the creator, the creative force, give me many demonstrations. And I love this one for parallel universes. So I have a friend, Sophia. She's an artist, and she's also psychic herself. And 6 or 7 years ago, she invited me and my wife to go see her art gallery exhibit. It was one of these things called a First Friday, where Friday nights the shops stay open, and it was from 5 to 7 p.m. And it was in a gallery that was in an outdoor walking mall. So we go there, we park, we get there about 5:30, we go in, no Sophia, well, maybe she stepped out. So we find her art. She's one of 3 artists being featured. We look at her art, it's very nice. The other artist is nice. We eat the celery sticks and the carrot sticks. And we know the person looks like the owner sitting at a table. And the owner has a young guy who's a photographer taking pictures of the guests. And, you know, we would conclude that we were in some of the pictures. The camera was up. And after 45 minutes, still no Sophia. So we decided, well, maybe she had a personal emergency, couldn't make it. So we left. And that night, I just couldn't resist. I had to send Sophia an email and said, wow, that's pretty cheeky of you. You invite us to your exhibit and you don't come yourself. And I let it go at that. I just had to poke her a little bit. And about 2 or 3 weeks later, she sends me an email. Dave, I found your email very interesting because I was there the whole time. And she went on, she said, and not only that, I talked to the owner. We went through all of the pictures from the photographer, and you and your wife did not appear in any of the pictures. So here we had 2 identical realities. Sophia was not in ours, and we were not in Sophia's. And yet the settings were identical. And this wasn't just Dave imagining it. I had my wife there. We had photographic evidence. We had Sophia there. And so it was a wonderful demonstration to me that parallel universes really do exist. You do occasionally step into them. Another one I had was I was in Las Vegas in the Luxor. We were in line for one of the 3D movies, and I looked across the atrium, and there was me. There was my doppelganger. The exact clothes, the glasses, the straw hat, everything that I was wearing there, that person was wearing. And I couldn't get out of line because they were getting ready to open the doors and let us in. And I couldn't find them later. Well, I'd like to get validation. So I talked to several mediums at different points about this experience. And they all concurred. And they said, yeah, that was you from a parallel universe that momentarily overlapped. And you could see each other. And then it separated again. So these wonderful experiences happen that help me understand that there's a much bigger reality than the little thing that we think we walk around in here. I kind of see this as being sort of like we're in the Super Mario's video game, and there's nothing to say that there can't be 10,000 other current games of Super Mario going on. We're in every one of them, and we're having different experiences in every one of them. And so the system is very interesting on how our reality is created. So can there be other realities adjacent to ours that do things, bring through entities, both good and bad? Absolutely. You know, I have no problem with that.
Yeah, that is really fascinating to think about. And I've had some similar experiences that where a couple of times where my husband and I have been coexisting, but in two different timelines. And
Mm-hmm.
it's like having a conversation with someone he would say, well, I specifically remember having this conversation. He doesn't remember having the conversation that I remember. And there are other times that I remember a conversation he doesn't remember ever having.
Yeah.
And there was one point where it became really obvious. We were having dinner, the four of us, and he looked at me and he said, what did you just say about something? He said, I said, and I said, I did not say that. I don't know who he was having dinner with, but it wasn't me in that moment. It was very, very strange. So sometimes communicating with him has been like this, like having two completely different experiences in the same what appears to be reality. Just fascinating. So yeah, it would be interesting to see, because so many different realities exist. And I was having this conversation with a mutual friend of ours, Shirley Bolstock, about if we could all just shift the reality into another reality where a lot of the pain and suffering and darkness that we've been experiencing never even existed. And enough of us made that choice, we could actually choose that other experience, right?
I think it's already happening. In my work, I see that there's 7 vibrational levels of Earth. We're on number 3, and that people are already migrating off of ours to 4, 5, 6, and 7. And in some cases, we have people who are backsliding, who have very dark cultures, where they're going back to number 2, where maybe they'll be happy if they're in a planet that supports a more fundamentalist religion, like they believe that everybody should experience. I have the feeling that when I check, I get that over 1 billion people have left our 3D Earth here and gone to the higher vibration Earth. And 2 ways that they do it. One is that we can have large groups of people dying. It could be from a tsunami, it could be from COVID, and actually they're taken and they are physically manifesting in these higher vibration Earths. The other way is that some people just move there and their background story is changed here, so we don't miss them. But I truly believe in my heart of hearts that one of these days, between the people who do statistics and others who do demographics, they're going to find that we can't explain the usage of water, food, fuel, natural resources, things like that, with the assumption that we have 7.5 billion people, and we don't really have 7.5 billion. You know, the numbers don't add up for that consumption.
Right. Yeah. So my understanding is that we're in the process of a bifurcation, where the 5D and the 3D are splitting off. So consciously, a lot of us have already moved consciously into the 5th dimension. It's just that right now our feet are physically planted in the 5th dimension.
Yeah, you can be physically in the 3D world and still having the 5D experience and the 5D perceptions, 5D gifts, understandings. I mean, in the big picture, what are we all trying to do? We're all trying to reach a point of some form of awakening, enlightenment, whatever you call it, ascension, that gets us into attunement with the Creator and understanding that we are part of the Creator and what our role is in working with the Creator, and knowing that, even if we know it in such a way that it is indescribable to other people. And I think with the the upcoming work, it's going to happen so soon. I also see karma going away because we don't have centuries and centuries and centuries and millennia ahead of us to keep repeating the same type of role to see, this time Bob shoots Jim, next time Jim shoots Bob, next time Bob comes back as Jim's mother who lost her son who was shot by Jim. I mean, all these types of scenarios, we don't have time to exercise that over and over and over. And so I really see the concept of karma having outlasted its need and dissipating and just going away. So one of the things that you mentioned I do is karma burning. And when I do karma burning for people, it's a guided meditation where I take them into a scenario where they release the karma from all of their lives with all the people who they have linkages to. And so it's just over and done with for good.
Yeah, the other thing that I was shown probably about 10 years ago when I first started having my spiritual awakening, I was told that Earth would be a learning planet until the time that our collective of souls determined for that to no longer be the case. And what I've been shown very clearly just the last few months is that enough of our souls have said, you know what, we're done with that agreement. That planet Earth is going to be returned to the garden that she once was. So So that is what we're moving into, is that the agreement that our souls made to learn through the contrast as a learning planet, we're finished with that. We're ready for Earth to become the paradise that she was once created to be. And then the other thing I was sensing while you were talking is that every human being ultimately wants the same thing, even if they don't know that's what they want, and that is peace on Earth. That's ultimately what we're all seeking, is peace. So it doesn't matter what the religion is or what the beliefs are or what any of that is, except for this, though there are some human beings have chosen to go so far down the path of darkness and greed and corruption that they might not want peace. But the vast majority of us, that's what we want. And so that's what we're gravitating to, is how to actually make what used to look like an impossibility actually become a reality.
Well, a lot of the information I get is that Earth is about the roughest, toughest place in the universe to have an existence, have an incarnation. And this was, at least with people on it, was never set up to be a paradise. It's set up to be a place where you can have spiritual challenge, overcome that challenge, and make rapid spiritual growth. One of the things that's frequently channeled by people who channel ETs is the common statement, Jiminy, you can make more progress on Earth in 10 minutes spiritually than you can on our planet in 1,000 years, because they don't have emotions. They have full telepathy, so you can't hide anything from anybody else. So from their point of view, they're in a utopia. They've eliminated social problems. You can't have people plotting to go rob the bank. The flip side is they've stifled innovation. They've somebody says, I have a new way to make ice cream. It's like, why bother with that? We solved that one 1,000 years ago. We don't need another way to make ice cream. Whereas here on this planet, it's like, I guarantee there's 10 people out there right now, who are taste testing new forms of ice cream to see if their new ice cream machine works. Even though we have plenty of ice cream machines out there already. So this planet offers lots of opportunities to be innovative. And I think with our shifts, that's why we're so attractive to so many star children, ETs, whatever you want to call those folks, who want to be here and observe the process, and in the majority of cases, either observe it or help. There's only a few negative ones out there.
Yeah. Very, very few negative people here, or entities, if you will.
Yeah.
And getting to be less of them, because as our vibration rises, they actually won't even be sustainable here. Because they can't exist in a frequency that's such a high frequency, they wouldn't even have an interest in being here, nor could they sustain that. The planet's not going to sustain that. A question I'm frequently asked is, why do we have evil? And I think we have way too much evil, but I think evil was part of the design here. And I like one of the Joseph Campbell quotes is that evil provides the rungs of the ladder that we push against to climb to the light.
so once again, it's a way for us to differentiate ourselves and to understand who we are and to make right choices, or occasionally to screw up, bump our knees, skin our knees, and bloody our noses, and then say, okay, I won't do that one again, and I'll learn from it, and I'll keep on moving forward. So you're going to learn lessons here. Some people are going to learn them the easy way, some are going to learn them the hard way. But we're all here to learn and grow. Very few people get the life where, okay, I'm going to be fabulously wealthy, I'm going to sit on the beach in Tahiti, I'm going to have little drinks with umbrellas, and that's my existence. For one thing, most people after a week or two of that would find it dreadfully boring, and they'd want to do something else anyway, and then they go out and get in trouble again. So who knows?
Well, and I think that's why some of the beings who are here have chosen to be here, because they got bored elsewhere.
Yes.
What a really challenging experience to be a human being. Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
if you're in the spiritual plane and you take on an incarnation here, it could be the equivalent of, okay, I'm going to go on safari in Africa. I'm going to go rough it. I'm going to go have wonderful experiences and take lots of pictures, and I can't wait to come back and tell you guys all about the experience. It should be a hoot. And like, yeah, okay, they get malaria, they get sick, an animal bites off their fingertip, but they come back and say, wow, what a ride.
right.
And,
Right.
and we're down here saying, oh my goodness, what was God thinking? Why am I put here? Why am I being punished? And it's like, no, you're not being punished. You're co-creating your reality. You chose a life where you could get lessons that you felt would round out your education. And some of those lessons are going to be tough, and you're up to it, and you're going to stick it out. And, sad to say, there's some people who take their own lives and cut that experience short. And that's too bad, because they took a slot that somebody else would have gladly taken, to also have that spiritual experience.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about it that way, but yeah, the human experience is it's like the most complex game ever created. So it's a very complicated game. And ultimately all of us that are here came here with a challenge. We were up to the challenge.
Mm-hmm.
Knowing that we were coming here to learn through the contrast, to learn through the darkness, and that the fear and the darkness are an excellent medium for growth.
Mm-hmm.
We were up to the challenge. But we get here, and a lot of people forget that they actually chose to be here.
Yeah, one of the other things in Joseph Campbell's book I really liked was a quote he borrowed from somebody else, where he talks about what compassion is. And the way he defines compassion is the joyful participation in the sorrows of the world. And it really harks back into Buddha, where Buddha, when he snuck out of the palace, out of his pleasure palace that his parents had created, to see what was really going on in the outside world, he saw three things that shook him to his core. One was people were aging. He hadn't seen people aging. People were sick, and people were dead. And those ended up becoming part of his noble truths, that this is a constant on this planet. You will never escape aging, sickness, and death. I mean, it's part of this experience. And therefore, I really like that definition, compassion. It's the joyful participation in the sorrows of the world. We will always have sorrows on this planet. We will always lose family members. We will always lose friends. We will always have crises in our lives. Okay, so how do you put on the happy face and say, I'm a co-creator of this, I'm going to learn from it, I'm going to make the best of it. I'm going to bring happiness and joy to others. I'm going to serve others. All these types of things. How can I make the best of this this camping experience where all it's done is lightning and stormed, and our tent's flooded, and our food's wet, and we can't get a fire lit? How am I going to make the best of it? Well, let's sing a song. Let's get out the guitar. How are we going to make the best of it? How are we going to bring joy to it?
I love that. Really love that. So, I would like to know, I'm looking at the information you gave me, how you got started in all this, because it's talking to someone who's a rocket scientist and then moving into spirituality seems like kind of an oxymoron, but obviously it's not. So I'd love to know more about how you got started in this, and then what are the services that you provide for people?
Sure. Well, as a kid, my dad would start out as an engineer, and then he became an Episcopal priest about the time that I hit kindergarten. And he did that until he had a sort of a moral failure and left priesthood when I was around 11 and my parents divorced. And my mom got interested. She had an astrology reading, and she thought it would just be, the type like you see in the newspaper. You're going to meet a tall, dark, handsome stranger. And the astrologer was saying things like, well, I see you broke your left arm when you were about 5 years old. Well, that was true. And you have a mole on your upper right thigh. Yes, that's true. My mom was so intrigued by it with what we would call evidential information that she had to become an astrologer. Well, I have 3 older brothers. They would not deal with Madame Zelda in the house like I would. So I became her test subject as we tried different things when I was in junior high and high school. So I was open to trying these things. I was open to the idea, these concepts. But then I kind of put them away as I went to engineering school. And then the big shift for me came. So I grew up in Wichita. I'd gone to Michigan for grad school. I worked at GM for a couple of years. I returned to Wichita, worked for Boeing for a few years, got tired of Wichita and was ready to move on, and came out here to Denver and worked for Martin Marietta, which became Lockheed. And that's how I got into rocket science. But in 1983, I returned to Wichita for my 10th high school reunion, ran into an old friend, and he said, "Did you become an electrical engineer like you expected?" I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Do you think it's possible to change things at a distance?" And he kept asking the obtuse questions, and he wouldn't come out with it. And I finally said, "Come on, tell me what's going on." He said, "Well, I'd rather show you." And so we went to his house, and we rode in his car and got out. We walked over to the side of the house, and he had me look at his electric meter. He said, "Do you see how fast the wheel is turning?" I said, "Yeah." The more power you're using, the faster the wheel turns. And he points at the meter and says, "Now," and it slows by a third. And he said, he told me, "I did this to my mother's house several months ago, and her bills are still lower." Wow, that's impressive. So we go inside. He has a little black and white TV with rabbit ears. He turns it to a channel that's just snow. He points at the TV and he goes, "Now," and he tunes in a station. He demonstrates something on his stereo that was similar, and then we went back outside to his car, and on his car, we sat in it, and it was idling, and his hands were off the controls. This is again, in 83, we didn't have electronic ignition, and he kind of points at the dash and goes, "Now," and the idle slowed down enough that the car started to stall. And he said, "I can stall other cars in traffic." It's like, wow, this is impressive. And then we went to his radio station, and he showed me that he could change the output power of a 50,000 watt transmitter, and he could lower it, and all with just kind of pointing and saying, "Now." And this all led to me needing to come back to Denver and saying, wow, there's a whole lot here I have to explore. I'm going to need a timeout for just a second. I'll be right back.
Throw a commercial in there while you were gone.
And I'm back.
Okay.
So I returned to Denver after all these demonstrations, and I said, this is something I can't ignore. It feels like the 2 big hands of God came down and said, "I'm going to give you a demonstration in your area of expertise, electrical engineering, that you can't ignore. And you can't explain by conventional means." So I really started digging in. I got involved in energy healing through therapeutic touch. That was very evidential for me because there were demonstrations where they brought in people and they said, something is wrong with this person, diagnose them, tell us what's going on. And I nailed it every time. It's very specific things like, it's not just the abdomen, it's the colon. It's not just the colon, it's the transverse colon. And I absolutely nailed it. And
Wow.
I got involved with a group that was channeling Tibetan ascended masters called the Tibetan Foundation, and learned how to channel. And I did some meditation practices. They didn't turn me on too much. And then I got involved with some psychic development groups, and just really took off from there. And a lot of people joked about me over the years. It's like Dave is like, Clark Kent and Superman. So Clark Kent is the aerospace engineer who his coworkers have no idea what he does. And then after hours, I'm doing healing work, I'm doing psychic work, all that kind of stuff, and just kept up with it. I left Lockheed in 2000 and went to a small engineering company. And I left them in 2003 when I won some Air Force R&D contracts, primarily because a voice came down in my head, and just like I was talking, said, you have all the money you need, you have all the time you need, go learn everything you can about healing. And I spent the next 4 years intensively taking classes, about 7 or 8 different healing modalities. I went to acupuncture school for a couple terms and decided it wasn't for me. I had 2 years of psychic development with a Denver medium who was a teaching medium, and a lot of gifts really started showing up, such as reading Akashic records. I had experience in meditation where I learned that hell is not objective. It's totally self-created. If you die believing in a hell, and if you have an image of what hell should be like, and if you think you should be there, the creation says yes. You end up in your hell. And anytime you want to tap your heels together and say, is this it? The angel steps in and says, okay, we can go. Well, they took me through an exercise where they said, we want you to develop a protocol for returning these people back to the spiritual plane. So I worked with them, and I did. And I, over time, got it to be faster and faster. So I worked with a lot of people, tens of thousands of people, returning them back to the spiritual plane from their self-created hells. There's no advantage to being in a hell. You are losing the opportunity for spiritual growth of being with the people who are both your friends and the ones that maybe you hurt. But you need to work it out in spiritual plane, and it's love and understanding. It's not retribution or anger or spite, any of those emotions. And that's soon after that I started doing the energy and entity clearing. I was in Las Vegas in 2008 on a vacation trip, and a woman called, and she said she was a friend of my daughter's, and her house had phenomena going on, and wondered if I could help her. And she had an entity there that was walking up behind her, saying her name. When she laid down in bed, it'd come over and press on the covers. Her 2 little kids are like 4 and 5, would see witches flying out of a closet. And she'd found after they bought the house and got a really good deal that the previous owner had hanged himself in the basement. And I made an attempt at clearing long distance, and it worked pretty well. And then after about 2 weeks, she said, some of it's coming back. And I found that this guy had hanged himself, was in, again, no coincidences, he was in his own hell, his self-created hell. I got him out of there, got him disconnected from the house totally, and all the phenomena went away. And that's when I really started doing clearings. And I've always had a policy that I do these clearings long distance. I never go to them. I don't want the entities there to know that I'm coming, and I don't want them to have an opportunity to try to latch on to me. And by doing it long distance, I can clear anybody anywhere in the world. I don't have to be there physically, and I can keep it much lower price that way too. Mm-hmm. So I've just continued to have other gifts show up, like the karma burning gift. Gosh, I've I've discovered some things. I find that some people have chakras that are so damaged and harmed that I'm allowed to do or supervise chakra transplants in the spiritual plane to replace their chakras. Yeah. Sometimes it's the heart, sometimes it's the throat chakra, and they're so damaged and deteriorated and disconnected from the multiple layers of the aura that the best solution is a brand new one. And I work with spiritual beings to install a new chakra. It's
Oh,
so,
that's amazing, because I do know a lot of people, heart chakra, throat chakra, and root chakra specifically have experienced a great deal of damage, especially people who have repeated the karmic cycle of a lot of women who had their throats slit and hang and all that through the hundreds of years of so-called witch trials.
Yes.
That a lot of women still deal with damaged throat chakras.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And the same thing with the root chakra. A lot of women who have experienced, and men too, but I find primarily with women who've experienced a lot of sexual trauma, their root chakras aren't working properly.
Yeah, root or the second chakra, the sacral. Sacral will have damage to it. Yeah.
That's really, really extraordinary that you offer that service.
Yeah, it comes up. Another thing that I work with is finding that a lot of people have, we used to think that if we had ET hybrids, it was 50-50 because it looked like, the sexual union of, a human and an ET. I'm finding now for about the past 8 or 9 years, a lot of people are being energetically hybridized. So one of the things I look at is what is the mix of a person, and I look at the percentages. I muscle test, and how much human, how much ET, how much angelic, how much gods and goddesses, how much ascended masters and teachers, and I go on down into the stranger things like Sasquatch or dragon energy, things like that. And I find that some people, they need to have an adjustment on there because maybe they have too much ET energy, and the ET form is too much of this idyllic view of what the world should be like, and it can't handle the reality that we have here. And it's very frustrated. It's walks around, very depressed. Wow, this is just a horrible place to be. Okay, maybe we need to adjust that where your human energy is at 40%. Maybe your composition needs to go up to 70 or 80%, and the ET needs to come down to maybe 10 or 15%. There's too much of that ET consciousness that is a frustration with the living circumstances here. And so I work with groups in the spiritual plane to adjust that. I also work with groups in the spiritual plane that help on your life chart, and say your life chart has challenges that are just too tough this time around, too many financial challenges. Sometimes I'm allowed to work with them and modify the life chart so we can take that out as one of the challenges you agreed to. So hopefully that will lighten up for you, and that one, we'll put it off to another lifetime that you can deal with that, and you shouldn't have to deal with it here. So
right. So not so many things all at once.
Yeah.
Maybe stretch out some of those experiences.
So some people are very enthusiastic in the spiritual plane when they take on a life. Oh, I can handle that. I can handle that. I can handle that.
Bring it
and
up.
They come down here and it's like, oh, wow, what did I do to deserve this? Darn it, God, why are you punishing me like this? Well, no, you chose it.
Right.
You knew the agenda.
So then they're given an opportunity to adjust the contract?
Yes.
That's really cool. So when someone connects with you, do you intuitively know what it is that they need to work on, or do they in advance tell you what kind of
Typically I offer different forms of service, such as spiritual gift determination or clearing or working with subconscious core beliefs or overall healing. But say somebody comes with healing, I'd say before the appointment, please list the healing issues you'd like to work with. They give those to me in the session, and I muscle test on those to determine what's the highest priority. We start with that one. Then I go back to the list and say, what's the next highest priority? We work with that one. So we because frequently when you work with one area on a person's body, it'll cause a ripple effect and it will change
Right.
issues with other parts of the body. So we work on the highest priority ones first.
Well, and as you're doing that, you're also clearing karma and dis-ease and beliefs and all that starts to unravel
Yes.
at the same time.
Yeah, disconnecting connections to parallel lives or past lives. I truly believe past lives are still continuing to go on just in their own timeline. It's not like they're over and done with and dead, and it's the films in the can. I've run into too many experiences on my own of going back and talking to past lifetimes that are still fully functional. So they're still capable of reaching forward to you in this lifetime, possibly with some of the traumas that they're having. And so we help them remotely, and then we disconnect from them. So they're not bothering you now with, why is my knee hurt? Well, it's because you hauling blocks in Egypt in 200 BC just dropped a block on your knee and crushed your knee.
Right.
You don't need to feel that pain from that lifetime, but we can help that lifetime, and we can also have them disconnect from the need to communicate with you with their distress.
Okay. Wow. It's really quite amazing how much more expansive the whole life experience is when we start to look at it from that perspective.
Yeah. It's I like one of the metaphors for our lives is your higher self, your spirit is like a giant gemstone. You're one facet of that. And if you think about a gemstone, no facet can see another facet because it's always over the edge. And yet, as you become more energetically connected, you realize that all these facets are coexisting at the same time, and all of them are reflections of the higher self and are a factor of what goes into making you also. So there is communication between all these past lives, future lives, parallel lives. It's going on all the time.
Yeah, so when I do my energy clearings in the morning, my clearing and protection, I actually send that out into all of my lifetimes and all of my frequencies and all of my universes and all of the timelines, so that I'm doing that energy clearing for every aspect of myself.
Yes.
So that other stuff isn't bleeding into this experience. That it's really amazing to be able to know that I have that capacity to heal
Absolutely.
all of my aspects across every plane of existence all at one time. So I just wanted to share that with you, that's a practice that I do for myself on a regular basis.
Wonderful.
Yeah,
it works. Very good.
Well, it makes this experience easier to move through because I'm not dragging other experiences along with me.
Yeah.
So I want to thank you for being here today. I would love to have more conversations to learn more about what it is you do. This is phenomenal. This actually has answered some questions because I've had people ask me over the last couple of weeks, how do I find out what my gifts are? And I would be happy to send them to you because that is and then what their life purpose is. A lot of people are really struggling with that. Okay, now that I know I'm here and I volunteered to be here, now what do I do with the reason that I'm here? Yeah. We know, ultimately we all have the same purpose, which is to find ourselves, to find the love within the fear and our own light within the darkness. We all have that same purpose, that challenge of seeing if we can find ourselves in it, which is the biggest challenge of all.
Yes.
And then there's also a life purpose, and then there's something called a higher purpose if you're willing to accept it. And that higher purpose is much more it's much more difficult. It's like agreeing to that. Okay, I'm going to agree to that higher contract that I made with my soul, and it's much more difficult to step into. And so I think the life purpose is layers and gifts. And so I'd like to really be able to send you to people who are wondering what their gifts are and how they can better serve humanity, what their reason is for being here. That would be great. Yeah.
Okay.
And all the amazing things that you do. I am fascinated by this. And
thank you.
Delighted to make your acquaintance. And I'm sure we will be talking again another time. And thank you all for watching. Again, I've got Dave's information in the details below, so do look him up, connect to his podcast, check out his website, and I'm sure there are some services there that he can provide for you as well. Until next time, and as always, get bold, be fearless, and live free. Yeah.